It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com.
Welcome to Dialogues with Dan, heard on Rockland World Radio every Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be sure to check out the archives by clicking on the Programs and Archives button located on the menu bar. And now, the host of Dialogues with Dan, this is Dan Windheim.
Richard, hi everyone. Hope everyone's doing great with this snow here in New York. Bitter cold. But tonight, I have a great guest, a live guest. I'm speaking with George Potanovic Jr., right?
That's
Is
right.
that pronounced right?
That's correct.
Potanovic?
That's right. You're right. Very
Yes.
good. Good job.
Nice to
Nice.
meet you, George.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Happy to be here.
Oh, pleased you're here. Maybe we could start with you, George, telling us a little about your background and about how you got involved with environmental issues.
Okay, thank you. I've always lived in the Hudson Valley. I was born in Yonkers but grew up in Ossining. So, of course, Ossining being a river town,
Yes.
I went to school in Ossining and learned about the river through living in a town, a river town. And in my schooling there, learned about environmental activism at the time during the 60s and going into the 70s, and became interested in ways that we could protect our environment. And appreciated the environment kind of also through my photography. It was around that time that I also became interested in photography, and as a way of sort of taking photographs of things that you consider to be important, it's a way to maybe raise people's appreciation for what they have. But then wanting to do more than that, when I came to Rockland County, I moved to Rockland County in 1981, so I've been here for over 30 years. I live in Stony Point. I bought a house in Stony Point. Nice. And I started an environmental group in Stony Point called SPACE.
Yes.
It's the Stony Point Action Committee for the Environment.
And SPACE, that's a great name.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. It fits.
Yeah, it fits,
Right.
yeah. So what SPACE does is SPACE started in 1990 when a lot of development was happening in Stony Point along the mountainsides of the town. And because it was happening on the mountains, a lot of erosion was happening into the water. The streams were getting messed up because of the erosion from the building on the mountainsides. And actually, we had a reservoir close in Stony Point because the Cedar Pond Brook was used to feed that reservoir, and all the siltation went in there and caused it to close. So it was an example of even how development can affect water. It closed a reservoir. Yeah.
Sure.
But through SPACE, we tried to also encourage people to participate in local government. That was something that I learned from an 8th grade social studies teacher about. It's important to to be an active citizen, and it was something that I've always remembered. Yeah,
Fantastic.
for all the years. So SPACE is now 25 years this year, which is a lot of years of going to meetings. Thank you, and going to a lot of meetings, planning board meetings and town board meetings. And one of the things that's most satisfying for me is when someone comes to a town board or planning board meeting for the first time and gets up and says something that they actually feel strongly about at a public hearing. To me, it's a wonderful thing, because I really do believe that is democracy in action. And that's always been something that's been part of me, I guess, for good or for bad. And Stony Point was lucky enough to get me to live there.
Yeah, exactly. So SPACE is made up of local community members?
Right, people in the community.
About how many?
Well, we have different amounts of people in the group. We've had as many as 150, 200 people in the group.
Wow.
But you know what it is? That people, more than becoming a member, because I really haven't done much in terms of fostering new membership lately, but people respect SPACE doing its homework. Once if they read an article in the newspaper, they'll say, oh, those guys, at least they did their homework. We may or may not agree with them, but the fact of the matter is they did the research necessary, you see. So that's what's important. Sometimes people become involved in issues and don't do the research. Now, they don't have to become experts, but sometimes even just knowing the right questions to ask is important. Or if you don't know the right answer, you ask the right question, you know.
Exactly.
And so, you know, without saying things that are maybe false or just making accusations against something that are unfounded, we've never done that. And that's where you build up a reputation over the years.
Sure.
You know, you become well known for at least being accurate and being reliable. So when the newspaper calls you up or a media, like you would interview me, you'd say, oh, at least this guy is telling me what's true. You know, he may not know the answer to everything, but at least he's going to tell you what he knows and tell you what he doesn't know. He's not going to make something up. And that's always been very important.
I imagine most of your members are very knowledgeable about the issues with pollution, the river, what's going on, and factual information.
Yeah, well, I think they appreciate where they live. You know, we live in probably one of the most beautiful places in the whole world, perhaps,
exactly.
the Hudson Valley. And I think when people appreciate where they live, they take an interest in trying to protect it. Now, that doesn't mean always being against something either. You know, you can be for things and against things. Right. But when you see a bad idea, it means you'll stand up and say, hey, this is not a good idea, or there's really information here that's not being looked at, you know, closely enough. And, you know, there are environmental review processes in New York State, and part of it is also becoming aware of what the process is. You know, what New York State says the law is, how the town has to review development, how they make a zone change, how they make a change to a plan on a site plan for a planning board. So when you become familiar with that, then the people that are in your group know how to focus their energy. In other words, what can we do? You know, what can we do? And, you know, sometimes some of the things they can do is write a letter to the newspaper. You know, they can talk to a friend. They can make people aware. That's one of the things I think that space has done very well is made people aware of things, because oftentimes people don't know what's going on until they see it being built, and then it's almost too late, really, you know.
Does Space have a website?
Yeah, Space has a website. It's www.stonypointer.org.
Stony Pointer.
Yeah, as in STONYPOINTER. .org. Yeah. People in Stony Point call themselves Stony Pointers. So that's the name that we picked, and it was a name that we could use. And we try to keep our website updated. It needs some updating right now, but we try to put up information for people on where to go to find information, to know about meetings that are coming up, things like that. So that's what Space has done. We've been involved in many issues over 25 years, probably too many.
You could share some of the issues back then and recently. Okay.
Well, one of the early issues we got involved with was, here's a good example of the county was planning to widen our Main Street on East Main Street in Stony Point, and they got federal money to improve the road. Well, part of the deal with getting that money meant that they had to take away the trees that were on the side. We had these beautiful trees that were alongside, maple trees that were alongside the road in Main Street in Stony Point. And this was one of the first issues that I got involved in, because I said, it'd be a shame to have to get this money for an improvement to a road and lose what is really, to me, makes it kind of like hometown America. You know, you have this beautiful Main Street line with trees on both sides. So what could we do? The regulations required that the road had to be a certain width, that you had to put sidewalks on, you had to have a right-of-way on the side, all these different things, and all of a sudden the road became a lot, to make it standard, up-to-date standard, it became bigger than what it was, you see. And so this became a problem. So we went to the town board meeting, got a lot of people to go. Many of the senior citizens who live in the town remember walking under those trees from the old elementary school, which is on the other side, the Stony Point Elementary School, which is on the other side of Main Street. They remember walking under the tree in the rain, and the leaves of the tree would keep them from getting wet. They had great stories they told about how these trees were important to them. Well, in the end, what we were able to do was we were able to get the plan changed so that they only put sidewalks on one side of the street instead of both sides of the street. You didn't really need it for both sides. There wasn't that much traffic, walking traffic. So by putting the sidewalks only on one side of the street, we were able to reduce the width overall of the road, and therefore we saved those trees. And when they were doing the work, they fed the roots. They tried to keep them good while they were working on it. Some of them ended up getting lost, but some of them were also a little diseased and needed to be taken down. But we saved mostly all the trees by that. So that was a good example of where activism, people's effort could actually save something in the town that was worth saving. You know?
That was satisfactory
at that time, and to people. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And it actually just a change in what was really an original plan was able to be changed. So that was a good example. Other issues that we became involved in were water issues. I mentioned that the building at that time in the early 90s, Stony Point was going through a lot of increased building development for homes. Much of the other part of the county had been developed, but as you were up in the north part, a lot of that development happened a little later, more like in the 90s. And all the flatland had been developed, so they were developing now up on the hills, up on Route 210, up on the mountainsides. And by doing so, as I mentioned before, the building of those homes caused a lot of erosion down into the streams. So in this case, the Cedar Pond Brook that runs along 210, which was a freshwater stream, was actually a trout stream in the county, and a source of water for the Spring Valley Reservoir at the time on Reservoir Road, was getting silted in with sedimentation. And we tried to get the planning process to change to better protect it. It didn't really do too well. The town review process was not that good, and the planning board, we felt, didn't do a really good job. So it was difficult. And in the end, the reservoir ended up getting closed because of the siltation going in, which is not good because now when we're looking at issues of water and where we're going to find more water, here's a reservoir up in Stony Point that was closed unnecessarily because of development issues where it could have been protected, and actually they're looking at possibly bringing that reservoir back online again somehow as an additional source of 500,000 gallons a day of water. It's not a big reservoir, but one that could actually be another source of water, and now we've got to go back and look at that. But what happens, Dan, is when people make quick decisions because of short-term profit for themselves, a developer would make, oftentimes it becomes a cost that goes back to the public, whether it's the ratepayers or whether it's the citizens of the town, because now that problem has to be fixed. So there is a financial cost to bad planning and bad environmental stewardship.
Yes.
People used to think the environment and the economy were at odds with one another, but really there's a way of doing things together for the benefit of the people and the environment as well as for the cost of things.
Yes. Do you feel like in the end things work out? Have there been issues where you walked away not feeling comfortable with what happened?
Yeah, more times than not, environmental people have to kind of be happy with the success they get. You never get what you want; you get what you need, right? The Rolling Stones said that. You try to get what you want, but you kind of take what you need. And the fact is, you have to be happy with some of the success that you got. And oftentimes, the success is very qualified. Well, we didn't really get what we want, but we were able to get some protection of that stream, or we were able to reduce the houses by this much, or something. So it's not often that you really get a big win, except that to kind of go fast forward a little bit into this work I was mentioning that we're doing with the Rockland Water Coalition. The last 7-8 years, the Rockland Water Coalition
Good segue.
worked on trying to stop what United Water wanted to build was a desalination plant in the Hudson River, claiming that Rockland County needed more water. It took 7 years for a group of, say, 30 different organizations. And what was unique about this, it wasn't just space. It was the Rockland Sierra Club, it was Riverkeeper, Clearwater, Scenic Hudson, Torn Valley groups, it was Preserve Ramapo. It was many different environmental and civic groups in Rockland County got together. And by working together and doing our research together, we were able to uncover what the real costs were going to be, that there weren't savings as much as United Water thought it was going to be, what the real costs were going to be, what the real impact on the river was going to be, what the potential impact was from Indian Point only being 3.5 miles north of where they wanted to draw this water out, and the fact that there's radionuclides that are in the water, that tritium and strontium-90 that go into the water that couldn't be filtered out. And that we got concerned about this. And we felt that the state wasn't doing an effective job of oversight, because we know utility companies and state agencies oftentimes have this, kind of a relationship that's a little too comfortable. To make a long story very short, the fact is we were able to convince the state that, number one, Rockland County didn't have a need for this additional water. We mentioned that usage actually went down over the years. United Water never said this, but we actually, by looking at the numbers, we saw that use actually went down.
Really?
That the real cost of this project was going to double our water rates, which would have been an expensive, really high cost, okay? And plus United Water claimed that they want to get paid when the state decided it didn't want to build a desalination plant, that it wanted to get paid for money it had already spent in what they call a surcharge, $58 million it wanted to charge the customers for a plant that was proven to be not necessary.
Yes.
So in the end, the state denied United Water the building of this plant for the time being. They denied them the surcharge that they wanted to spend. It was like now over $60 million they wanted to charge the customers. And instead, what the state said is, okay, Rockland County, instead of building a plant and doing what we would call a supply side answer by building something greater supply, you could focus on demand side, which is conservation, more sustainable planning, better use of our water, and by doing so, by reducing demand, we would eliminate the need for a desalination plant for many years into the future, perhaps forever.
Yes.
So that's where we are right now. But that was a decisive win. Really, in New York State, when a Public Service Commission makes a decision that they wanted this plant, it's very rare that they'll go back and reverse that decision, and that's what happened in this case. So we would consider that to be as close to 100% win as you could get. And a lot of people in Rockland County who put a lot of work and effort into this felt really satisfied. That in this case, we didn't have to make excuses. Well, we won, but we didn't get this. We won, but we didn't get that. In this case, this was a really great example of a combined effort working with our elected officials and towns and villages in Rockland County to say to the state, look, we can do better. We talk about sustainable planning. We can do better. And now the state has given us this chance to do it, but now we have to work on it. So there's a task force that's been formed.
Exactly.
And now we're working on this task force to try to develop ways to reduce water use.
What?
Yeah.
So you're talking about water. Say that you don't need to build this, more this. This theory could apply
Other
to
places.
many things.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's good. Audrey Zibelman, who's the chair of the Public Service Commission, she's only been in for about 1.5 years or 2 years now.
Right.
She actually said that at a meeting we went to on February 12th. We had a task force meeting. She came down to Rockland County for this meeting, and she said that what we're doing in Rockland County could set an example for New York State. She's not been in there long enough where she feels she has to go along with the way things have always been done, which is great to see.
Yes.
So instead of being part of, say, a system that's going on forever and try to defend that system, she's willing to look at things differently. She's doing it with energy, and she also wants to do it now with water. So she's given Rockland County a responsibility. Harriet Cornell, like I said, is the chair of the committee. John Parker was just hired as a coordinator for the task force. And Audrey Zibelman said when she heard the presentations by the chair people from our task force, she was very impressed with the progress that we've made in a very short amount of time. But she wants to see us continue to come up with a water policy that Rockland County can generate for itself. But like you say, could become a policy really that other communities across the state could begin to look at and say, we can do better to reduce demand. Water policy is important. More sustainable planning is what people want. So let's work on better plans that other communities can apply to as well. And that's what we're trying to do now. So it's kind of exciting. We're working on something that really could be something really new. So that's where things are. And to me, that's very satisfying because it's rare that you get a chance to really affect some kind of change like that. Yeah,
Yeah, you were talking about water, but it's like the mall, like the new mall.
Right.
Well, not that new.
Right.
But the
Right,
mall.
1996.
Yeah.
It was built in 97.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, we could just improve like they did the Nanuet Mall.
Yeah.
And we didn't need this Palisades Mall.
Right, and people in business are already looking at water to reduce water. Like you'll see low flush toilets, for example. They've improved those. They actually work now. But I went to a restaurant recently, and believe it or not, when you go into the men's room to use the restroom, there was a button on there with a 1 or a 2. And you could push either one for more water or less water. So there's an example, but you can think an example of where how many flushes go out and how much water is used. That if you could reduce water use, that magnifies by so many people. So maybe there's businesses now that are starting to look at ways to reduce water, also to reuse water. If you're using water to cool, like a computer room or something like that, you don't have to use drinking quality water for that. You could use water that's reused water. So people are beginning to look at ways, these are the kind of examples I guess we're saying need to be looked at, ways that we can reuse a resource rather than just waste it and send it out to the Hudson River only to be wasted and not being reused. So this is where people are thinking differently now.
Exactly.
And it's for businesses as well as everyone's a part of this. You know, everybody's a part of this.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I see you have a lot of thoughts out there your mind's going 1,000 miles per hour. Do you have? Is there enough time in the day?
Not always. No, it's not always enough time in the day. But one of the things we found out from this coalition is that by working with other people, don't forget, we went against a company, multi-million-dollar company, United Water. Suez Environment is an international company with lots of money they spent on advertising, PR, and we successfully fought that with citizens that had no money, no budget,
Right.
But because the citizens were very dedicated to trying to find a better way of looking at a problem and their own environment where they live, these are people who believed that they could do better and that by working together we could share information, share expertise. Different people bring different things to the problem, different ways of looking at it. We have some people that look at the amount of water that goes to New Jersey. There was an excessive amount of water going to New Jersey.
Yes.
Some people like to look at that. Some people like to look at a better way of conserving water. Everybody has a different talent and ability. And what was nice about this water coalition is I think we were able to make use of a lot of their talents. And make them feel part of it without anyone feeling overwhelmed too much on any one thing. Although it did get to be intense and a lot of time commitment for some of us,
Really?
but it was something that we were able to share in the work, which was I think was a great example of what probably would be a good model for the future of activism. Working together, and with our
George.
elected officials.
Yeah, could you maybe speak about a few of your partners? I know you said the Sierra Club,
Right.
and you have a few others
Right.
that you work with.
Right.
Yes, could you mention
Well,
maybe a few of?
One of the people that helped me in the effort to form the coalition, we did it together, was Peggy Kurtz. Peggy Kurtz lives here in Nyack. Peggy Kurtz is the chairperson of the Rockland Sierra Club, and Peggy and other people that were on the water coalition. But Peggy's commitment to this water coalition was tremendous and really helped keep everybody involved and felt part of. When you do this for over 7 years, it's a long time. You know what I mean? And people can get worn down very easily. They can feel run down. You got other things going on in your life that are going on. All of us had that, but that was a big commitment. For her, as well. And Laurie Seaman was another person who worked very closely with us as well. We worked with Riverkeeper. Paul Gallet is the president of Riverkeeper. We worked with Paul Gallet in an advisory capacity. Oftentimes he would advise us on some of the things that we might follow in terms of strategy, how the Water Coalition might approach certain subjects. We had to work with elected officials, Alden Wolf and Harriet Cornell. These were people who were very committed. But, when you start saying, well, we're not going to need a desalination plant, people sometimes are also a little hesitant. They think, well, we don't want to have a drought. We don't want to have a problem when we don't have enough water. And then people come back and blame us for saying, well, you said we didn't need this. But something, we were able to bring people on like Al Appleton. Al Appleton lives in Connecticut, but he's an expert. He was the in charge of the water system for New York City and was successfully, he was in charge of it as commissioner of New York City's water supply and sewer. And he was able to successfully reduce water in New York City by about a third by installing low-flush toilets and things like this. So he had firsthand experience and was well known as an expert. So by bringing in experts to help with the activism, we were able to substantiate the things that we were saying so that then elected officials felt more comfortable about getting involved and realized that there was real facts here. So we were backing it up with real data. And the fact that it showed, for example, if we had built a desalination plant and spent doubling our water rates to do it.
Yes.
Doubling our water rates alone would have driven demand down even further to the point where the desalination plant would have been needed. So what you're doing by increasing cost, when you increase cost for something, people use less just for the reason of increased cost. So if you spent the money to build something, double the cost, what happens? People use less, and you don't even need that thing. So it's really kind of a white elephant. So concepts like this, we had an analysis done of some of the real costs of we had a group called Eco Northwest out on the West Coast, look at United Water's finances, just a basic look without even going in real detail. And they said that the information that the water company had provided was so poorly organized and without detail that no informed person could make an informed decision from this. So here, we're not experts in that area. We're not financial people. But to say that in an industry where they know how things should be outlined, to not give that information accurately indicates that that information is being hidden from people to a certain extent. So we were concerned about that. So when you start to put together different pieces and different people then all of a sudden say, well, a second, they're not just environmentalists that just care about the water and the trees and things like this. They're concerned about the real cost of something, because a real cost of water becomes a factor in delivering water. Has to be provided efficiently and enough supply. Those are two factors that have to be given. It has to be done at the right kind of supply, the cost, and it has to be provided in a sufficient amount. Those are two factors that the Public Service Commission said are the two most important factors for water supply.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe you could. Well, we have about 10 minutes. Maybe you could tell us, what is desalination?
Okay.
Like, what actually goes on, and
right.
What is it?
Right. Well, desalination is a process that is used, that would be used at different ways of doing desalination, but it's a system that would include energy. So energy cost for this was very high. To heat the water to produce steam that would then go through a filter, and that this water would be filtered so the salt would be taken out. So we have an estuary, as you probably know, in the Hudson River, where we have salt water mixing with fresh water. Right. And United Water wanted to place this desalination plant in Haverstraw Bay, which is in the middle of where the water goes both ways, right? The Hudson River goes both ways. You got fresh water. You got fresh water on one side from the north coming down, but you have the salty water from the ocean coming in. So it mixes. Yeah. That actually makes Haverstraw Bay a very fertile estuary for new fish being born and for life in the river, because those fish end up going out to the ocean, but they actually are nurtured and are born in a river. So a river becomes an important part of an ocean ecosystem as well. So this reverse osmosis would use a lot of energy to process water, and that water would then be separated, so the salt would be taken out, other chemicals would be taken out, in fact, to a point where the water would be, through reverse osmosis, would have nothing in it really of nutrients, would have to be then added back in again, and then be sent out. It wouldn't be stored like a reservoir. It would actually be piped right into the Rockland water supply. So North Rockland would get it, but also the rest of the county would get it as well. Now, Rockland County currently gets water from 3 different sources, a third, and a third. A third of it comes from Lake DeForest Reservoir. Yes. A third of it comes from well fields out in Ramapo. And another third of it comes from a variety of other well fields that are spread throughout the county. So we get 2/3 of our water from groundwater, and we get 1/3 of our water through surface water, through Lake DeForest. What this desalination plant would have done was provide an additional supply of what United Water said we needed was 7.5 million gallons a day of water, mostly to satisfy summer usage when people are filling their pools or watering their lawns, which we know they don't have to do all the time. They do too much of that watering. The fact is that it's not necessary, and it's one of those peak usages of water. That's when you have a problem, when you have too much use in the summertime. One of the things we found out as a water coalition is that United Water had been exceeding its releases from the Lake DeForest Reservoir down to New Jersey. New Jersey has the right to receive some amount of water from Lake DeForest, but in 2007 it was found out that they over-exceeded the amount of water they were sending down. So our concern was that they wanted to desalinate the water from the Hudson River, double our water rates in Rockland County, charge us twice the price for it, basically, because of the cost of building the plant, of operating it with the energy, and then sending more water from Lake DeForest down to New Jersey at the same time of the fresh water that we have in Lake DeForest. So we were concerned that this was really a bad deal for Rockland County, that we were not getting, we were going to pay high price for something that was not as of good quality, so that more of our fresh water from Lake DeForest could go down to New Jersey. This is not an easy thing to figure out just when someone comes to you with a proposal. Let's build a desalination plant. Yes. Everyone was in favor of it. They thought it was a great idea. It's when you start to look below the surface a little bit and realize that, oh, they want to move water, because don't forget United Water has United Water New Jersey. They're associated. In fact, United Water New Jersey is the parent company of United Water New York. Yes. So they want to send water down to New Jersey. New Jersey has its own issues with water down there when they have droughts and they're not conserving water properly down there. They have a leak rate that was like 24%. 24% of the water that was going through their pipes was leaking, or what they call unaccounted for water. Non-revenue water, the water company would call it. Rockland County had 21%. So 21% of the water that was going through the pipes was leaking. I mean, we ought to be fixing leaks before we start looking at building a desalination plant. So these are the kind of things, the basic kind of things that people would say, yeah, that makes sense. Why would we want to? We were sending 14 billion gallons of water back into the river every year through our sewer systems, through our drains, through our storm drains, and then we're going to turn around and have United Water pump it back out and sell it to us again. It doesn't make any sense. There was a groundwater study done in the years 2005 to 2010 that showed that Rockland County's groundwater was recharging at a faster rate than we thought. Originally, there was concern that we didn't have enough water and that the groundwater was not sufficient. But after this study was done by the USGS in 2010, it was shown that indeed the groundwater was recharging at a faster rate. Now we have to do more to protect it and more to put that water back in the ground, but it showed that things were not as bad as United Water tried to make them seem.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in our last 10 minutes, there's a few things I want to maybe touch on.
Okay.
But you say that the water system, we're in good shape there.
Well, we are, and the thing is, we have to do better. I mean, we have to maintain, and this is where everybody's effort comes in to do what they can, and whether it's in their business or at home, to conserve water in the best way they can. And this is what the Water Task Force will be coming out with and trying to bring people together to say, hey, we can all work together here to better manage our existing water supply. So we don't need to build a desalination plant sometime down the road. Right now it's on hold. Right now it's stopped. It's been stopped. But so that we don't need it in the future, whether it's 5 or 6 or 10 years down the road, we want to make sure that we stay on course for a water plan that's what we would consider to be more sustainable.
Yes. Yep. So you would say the water issue is your main topic you want to deal with.
It has been now for the last 7 years. There are other issues. You mentioned waste disposal, and that sort of thing was another one you were interested in, I know.
Yes.
There's issues going on with that as well. So there are many different issues, but I guess, water has been a big one, and water is a big one in Rockland County.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. My last 2 questions about green living.
Okay.
Are you big on green living?
Yeah. Well, what is green living? I mean, green living is making what we consider to be making best use of our existing resources, right? Not wasting things. People are building buildings now that are of certain standards where they're energy efficient, right? We put insulation in homes. We try to keep our thermostat down and also use the heat efficiently. Yes. I mean, that's what you consider to be green living, wouldn't you? I mean, don't let your water running when you don't need to. I mean, I guess all these things are a mindset, that we look at. Instead of being wasteful people, we become thoughtful people, and we become people who are willing to make an effort to not waste things. Why is it, just because you can afford it, say, oh, I don't care what the water bill costs, or I don't care what this costs. We know energy costs are high because people say, oh, yeah. But I'm saying is that why become a person that doesn't care about it? Because every time you turn a light switch on or electricity, you have to burn some kind of a fuel somewhere that's going to go into the air. And that contributes to global warming, or what we would consider to be climate change. Right? We talked a little bit about climate change. So why add to that problem? Why not try to use your resources efficiently so that you don't have to add to other problems. One thing causes the next problem. So in other words, we all have to use a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of water, a certain amount of food, a certain amount of garbage we have produced. But let's try to do it in the most thoughtful, efficient way that we can. I guess that's what it means to be a citizen and be a part of something.
So you feel people are doing a better job at living their lives, not being wasteful, and not always taking the easy way out?
Well, I think some people are. I think more people need to be. One of the examples that was brought up was an example of in Rockland County in the 1970s or 80s, a lot of communities were building incinerators for garbage, to burn garbage.
Yes.
And Rockland County didn't go that way. See, a lot of communities built incinerators. Right. And the incinerators, of course, had their own problems with air pollution and things like this. So instead, what Rockland County did was Rockland County got involved in recycling. So what we do now every week, right, we put our recycling out on the curb. And people then save their bottles and their cans and their newspapers. And instead of burning things in order to reduce garbage out, because the landfills closed, right? The landfills were filled. Now what we're trying to do is recycle. We have been successful in Rockland. We have a very high percentage of people who are willing to recycle. Well, there's an example of where people can come together and say, oh, it's not that big a deal. I just separate out my stuff. I might compost some of it, throw it in my garden rather than throw it in the garbage. You know, so I guess that's a mindset for people to be more efficient with what they have. And that's the kind of thinking, I guess, that to me is encouraging, you know. Not everybody does it, but I think a lot of people do. And Rockland has shown that it can work, you know. So I guess we're looking for the same kind of mindset with water. You know, just like we're looking for energy, people try to, because energy is a big cost component, but people are looking at the same kind of thing with water and other kinds of things as well. You know.
That's right.
Yeah.
And lastly, maybe could you share some role models in you know, recycling, and are there any role models out there
of people that I think
besides yourself?
Yeah, I don't know if I can think of as much of a role model. I guess, like I mentioned to you before, I get a lot of inspiration from just people that I meet who care about the life they live and where they live. They may not be role models, like you'd say, read about them in a newspaper as a person that everybody knows who they are, but they're just people trying to live their lives. And to me, that's what's inspiring, that they take their role as a citizen in the community, that they believe that they can make a difference as an individual, you know, that they believe that there's a greater purpose than just living your life every day and who cares about anything, just waste what you want and do what you want. To me, people that are really concerned and connected with where they live and trying to respect the environment and respect other people, that's what I think is a role model. So instead of really saying one person, I guess it's this kind of attitude that I see. And I learned it from an 8th grade social studies teacher that I had at the time, and that inspired me to think about these kind of things, and it's remained with me for all these years.
Awesome.
And I think that's the kind of thing that encourages me, I guess. Like I said, when someone gets up at a meeting and for the first time they get up and they say something to their elected officials, which they have a right to do, but they realize that it's not just about voting, but it's about being part of a system, a democracy where people are part of a solution, not just complaining, right? Not just complainers about a problem.
Like you said, George, 30 minutes goes by awful fast.
Yeah, so we're there, right?
Yeah, we are there. So
Dan, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been nice to be here with you.
You have a lot of great things to say.
Thank you.
And keep saying them.
I'm happy to be here with you.
Yes,
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Well, everyone, this has been George Botanovic on Dialogues with Dan. Have a great week. Peace.
It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com.